Okay, so you want to own a nuclear power plant. Reactors supply about 10% of the world's electricity, and the average one runs at close to 90% output almost every day of the year. It sounds like the safest infrastructure bet on the planet. It is not. And the number that proves it is close to $34 billion, what 2 new reactors in Georgia ended up costing before they ever produced a single watt. By the end of this video, you'll know why the reactor itself is almost never where the real money gets made, and about one federal rule that could leave you paying for someone else's disaster. We're Torture Tycoon, and we take apart the businesses you'll probably never own, but secretly want to understand. Start with the case for the defense because it's a genuinely strong one. Nuclear reactors supply roughly 10% of the electricity generated on Earth, and about a quarter of every low-carbon watt produced anywhere in the world comes out of one of them, according to the International Atlantic Energy Agency's own reactor database. That's a quarter of the entire clean power supply resting on a few hundred machines. There's a part that makes it look even better on paper. The global median capacity factor for a nuclear reactor sits around 88%, and plenty of individual reactors run at 90% or higher. Capacity factors just how often the plant actually produces power compared to its theoretical maximum, and nuclear crushes almost everything else on that measure. Wind and solar rise and fall with the weather. A reactor just runs, day and night, through summer and winter, at close to full output, dispatchable baseload, power you can count on showing up on command at scale. That reliability is exactly why more than 20 countries stood up at the COP28 Climate Summit in Dubai and pledged to work toward tripling the world's nuclear capacity by 2050. Governments aren't chasing a dying technology. They're chasing the one power source that behaves like a factory instead of a weather forecast. So that's the promise. By the end of this video, you will understand why the reactor sitting inside that concrete dome is almost never the actual business, and the one federal rule buried in U.S. law that can make an owner personally responsible for a disaster at a plant hundreds of miles away that they played no part in. Before any of that upside matters, you have to survive the part where you actually build the thing, and this is where nuclear stops looking like any other power plant. The industry has a specific term for the sticker price: overnight cost. What construction would cost if you could build the entire plant instantly, with no interest piling up and no inflation eating into the budget while cranes are still on site. It's a useful number because it strips out financing, but a bit of a fiction, since real reactors take the better part of a decade to build. The U.S. Department of Energy put that overnight cost at roughly $7,821 per kilowatt in 2023 dollars, based on a 2-unit AP1000 plant, around $12.5 billion for a plant in the 1,600 megawatt range, before a single dollar of interest gets added. A 2015 survey of Princeton's Andlinger Center asked 16 industry insiders for their own estimates and landed on a median answer between $4,100 and $6,100 per kilowatt. The people who actually build these things don't agree with each other on what building one costs. Then there's what actually happens once ground gets broken. And Vogtle in Georgia is the case study the whole industry points to. Units 3 and 4 were certified at around $14 billion in 2017 regulatory filings. By 2021, that had climbed past $28.5 billion. By 2023, the total had reached roughly $34 billion. Georgia Power's own slice, just its 45.7% ownership share, came to $10.65 billion net, implying a combined total near $23.76 billion for the 2 units alone, plus $3.53 billion in financing costs that were never even capitalized, landing straight on ratepayers through surcharges on their monthly bills. The number the video opened with, close to $34 billion, is that project. This isn't new territory for the Vogtle site either. Back in the 1980s, the same plant's original 2 reactors saw their capital cost estimate climb from $660 million to $8,870 million, close to $19.5 billion in today's money. The same site blew its budget twice, 4 decades apart, under two completely different construction teams and regulatory eras. Finland's Olkiluoto 3 tells the same story with a different currency. The reactor was originally priced at about 3 billion euros. By the time it was finished, cost estimates had climbed to roughly 11 billion euros, and the delays grew so bad that the utility TVO and its construction consortium ended up in a dispute settled with a 450 million euro payment. Same industry, same physics, same result. The number on the original pitch deck and the number on the final invoice aren't the same number. If any of this still gets built, it's for one simple reason. Governments have invented financing structures specifically to make numbers like these survivable. The UK's Hinkley Point C runs on a contract for difference, which locks in a guaranteed price of roughly £92.50 per megawatt hours in 2012 terms, closer to £100 today, for 35 straight years, about double the UK's historic wholesale electricity price. Britain's National Audit Office estimates the total top-up payments consumers could end up covering over that contract's life at somewhere near £30 billion. The newer Sizewell C project uses a regulated asset base instead, where the owner starts earning a regulated return during construction itself, with the regulator, Ofgem, overseeing what counts as a fair return. Strip away the acronyms, and both structures do the same job. Turn a project that could bankrupt a private company into something closer to a government bond with a reactor attached. Once the concrete is poured and the debt is on the books, the entire calculation flips. And this is where nuclear starts to make sense as a business rather than a fiscal experiment. The standard yardstick for comparing any power plant is the levelized cost of electricity, or LCOE. Take every dollar the plant will ever cost, from construction through field through decommissioning, and divide it by every megawatt hour it will ever produce over its whole life. For a brand new reactor, that construction bill dominates the math, easily 60% or more of the total LCOE. But once the plant is running, the construction cost becomes a sunk historical fact rather than something anyone is still deciding on. From that point forward, profitability comes down to two numbers: how often the plant runs, and what it can sell its power for. The Nuclear Energy Institute tracks this in detail every year, and its 2024 numbers are worth sitting with. The average total generating cost across the entire U.S. nuclear fleet came in at $33.74 per megawatt hour, down 37.6% since 2012, driven by fuel costs falling 41.6%, capital spending falling 48.6%, and operating costs falling 30.9%. Scale matters too. Multi-reactor sites average $31.88 per megawatt hour, while single-unit plants average $41.88, a full $10 gap from sharing staff and infrastructure. Put real numbers through that formula and the business becomes obvious. A 1,000 megawatt plant running at 90% capacity factor produces about 7.88 million megawatt hours a year. At that $33.74 generating cost, it spends roughly $266 million a year to operate. Sell that power at an average wholesale price of $50 per megawatt hour, and it brings in about $394 million, leaving a gross margin near $128 million a year before debt service. That's the entire business model. Run as close to constantly as physically possible and sell into a market where the price sits comfortably above your cost. That 90% figure shows up in real operating data too. Vogel's existing units posted a capacity factor of 95.09% in 2017, with a lifetime average near 91.25%. And in 2024, the site's combined units produced almost 34,000 gigawatt hours. Over in France, EDF's fleet added 41.5 terawatt hours of extra output in 2023 as reactors came back online after repairs, pushing total nuclear generation to 320.4 terawatt hours for the year. These aren't fleets limping toward retirement. They're machines running close to their physical ceiling year after year. The Nuclear Energy Institute numbers cut this one more way worth knowing. merchant plants, the ones selling directly into competitive markets without a guaranteed regulated return, actually averaged $30.11 per megawatt hour in 2024, lower than the $36.51 averaged by regulated plants. Reactor design barely moved the number either. Boiling water reactors averaged $33.58. Pressurized water reactors, $33.82. What actually drives generating costs down is scale and fleet experience, not the specific technology inside the containment dome. Break that operating cost down further, and fuel itself turns out to be a surprisingly small piece of it. The Department of Energy's Net Zero World Initiative estimates fixed operating and maintenance costs between $4 and $43 per kilowatt of capacity each year, with variable costs for fuel and capital sitting between $9.25 and $16.50 per megawatt hour. Most of the ongoing spending goes toward keeping a very large, very regulated industrial facility staffed, maintained, and compliant, not toward buying fuel. But that $50 wholesale number is about to look conservative. Here is the reframe the whole industry has been living through for the past 2 years. You're not really running a power plant that sells electricity onto the open grid. You're running one of the only sources on the planet that can promise a buyer firm, carbon-free power every hour of the day for decades at a stretch. And that promise is worth far more than the ordinary wholesale price. A nuclear plant behaves less like a power station and more like a hotel with fixed overhead and a limited number of rooms, except a growing share of those rooms are now being booked decades in advance by tenants who will pay almost anything not to lose the reservation. In September of 2024, Constellation Energy agreed to restart 3 Mile Island's undamaged Unit 1, closed since 2019, and sell every megawatt it produces to Microsoft under a 20-year power purchase agreement, reopening the site as the Crane Clean Energy Center with a restart targeted for 2028 pending federal approval. Constellation called it the largest power purchase agreement in the company's history. Analysts at Bloomberg Intelligence and Jefferies estimated Microsoft's price at somewhere between $100 and $115 per megawatt hour, roughly 3 times the $33 to $34 generating cost you just saw for an ordinary existing reactor. The reason any of this is happening now comes down to a problem Microsoft and Amazon share. Running an AI data center takes an enormous, constant supply of electricity, and both companies have publicly committed to running that electricity on carbon-free power around the clock, not on some annual accounting average. Wind and solar can't promise that on their own, because the sun sets and the wind stops. A reactor can, which is exactly why plant utilities that were ready to write off a few years ago suddenly turned into one of the most sought-after assets in the power sector. Amazon has been running the same playbook. In 2024, it bought a data center campus next to Talen Energy's Susquehanna nuclear plant for $650 million. By June of 2025, the two companies expanded that relationship into a 17-year, $18 billion power purchase agreement covering up to 1,920 megawatts, ramping to full volume by 2032 and running through 2042, stacked on top of whatever power Talen still sells into the ordinary grid from the rest of Susquehanna's 2.5 gigawatts of capacity. The hyperscaler deal doesn't replace the old business, it's a second, with a more profitable revenue stream layered on top of it. Line those numbers up and the shift is obvious. A reactor selling into the ordinary wholesale market clears somewhere around $30 to $50 per megawatt hour. The same reactor locked into a dedicated contract with a company that needs to prove its data centers run on clean power can clear 2 to 3 times that. That spread, not the wholesale market, is where the real profit in this business now lives. Exactly why plants mothballed a few years ago, written off as stranded assets, are suddenly worth fighting over. A plant worth that much comes with a bill nobody puts in the pitch deck, buried well below ground. Start with the cost that everyone assumes is being ignored, decommissioning, because it's actually the one cost the industry accounts for most carefully. The Department of Energy's Net Zero World Initiative estimates decommissioning costs between $750 and $1,250 per kilowatt of capacity. For a 1,000 megawatt plant, somewhere between $750 million and $1.25 billion. That amount gets funded gradually through dedicated decommissioning funds over decades, rather than paid as one shock at the end. The cost that catches most people off guard is staffing, because a nuclear power plant runs less like a factory and more like a small city. In the 1970s and 80s, a single reactor unit could employ more than 1,500 workers. That number has fallen by a third or more since 2000 as plants become more efficient to run. But even a leaner, modern plant is still one of the largest employers in whatever town it sits in. Indian Point, before it shut down in 2021, carried an annual payroll of about $140 million for close to 1,000 employees. Security alone cost the U.S. nuclear industry an estimated $272 million a year, roughly $4.4 million per site, covering about 9,000 armed guards nationwide. No gas plant, wind farm, or solar array carries a private armed security force anywhere close to that scale. Now for the part that actually reaches into an owner's pocket. Every nuclear plant in the country operates under the Price-Anderson Act. Each plant owner is required to carry $500 million in primary liability insurance for their own site. Above that sits a second pooled layer. Every one of the 95 reactors covered under the Act can be assessed up to roughly $155 million per incident. 94 other reactors, each assessed up to that amount, adds to somewhere near $15.6 billion, stacked on top of the $500 million every plant already carries on its own, bringing total available compensation to roughly $16.3 billion for a single accident. Congress extended this entire framework through 2045 when it passed the ADVANCE Act in July of 2024. Decommissioning and Price-Anderson are two very different kinds of liability. Decommissioning funds are collected gradually, dollar by dollar, across decades of operation, sitting in a segregated account the owner can't touch for anything else, a large cost, but a predictable, budgeted one. The insurance pool sitting above it isn't predictable at all. Nobody knows in advance which plant will need it or when, which is exactly why it has to be shared across every reactor in the country instead of carried by one owner alone. Read that mechanism closely and the personal exposure becomes clear. That secondary layer isn't insurance on your plant. It's a mutual assessment across every covered reactor in the country, which means the bill doesn't stop at your own fence line. If a reactor melts down in another state, owned by a company you have never signed a single contract with, you help pay for it too. Zoom out from any single owner and a longer, slower problem comes into view. The IAEA's own 2023-4 reporting notes that more than 2/3 of the world's operating reactors are already at least 30 years old. Every dollar of that AI-driven premium pricing is being paid for power coming out of machines built decades ago, running well past the assumptions their original engineers were working from. When France's EDF brought reactors back online after repairing a wave of stress corrosion problems, French nuclear output jumped by 41.5 terawatt hours in 2023 alone, reaching 320.4 terawatt hours for the year, with the company targeting similarly strong output since. The International Energy Agency has gone as far as calling the long-term operation of existing nuclear plants the least cost option for low-carbon electricity available anywhere. Old reactors kept well maintained age better than the fleet's calendar age would suggest. The problem was never whether an old reactor could keep running. The problem is what happens once one finally can't and whether anything gets built in time to replace it. Every financing tool covered earlier, the contract for difference, the regulated asset base, exists specifically to solve that new construction problem, and neither has yet produced a project that came in on its original budget. Governments have figured out how to guarantee a price for 35 years. Nobody has figured out how to guarantee a construction schedule. More than 20 countries pledged that COP28 to triple global nuclear capacity by 2050, and that pledge needs an actual wave of new construction. more than the restarting of old plants can ever deliver. Every new build study case in this video argues against that being easy. Vogtle's bill roughly doubled from its first certified estimate. Olkiluoto 3's nearly quadrupled. Hinkley Point C kept trending higher even with the government locking in that price for 35 years. 3 projects, 3 countries, 3 decades of delay between them, and the same pattern every time. The number on the first slide is never the number on the final invoice. Put those 2 facts together and the dilemma is uncomfortable. The AI data center boom is currently bidding up the price of reactors that already exist, not proving that the new ones can be built on budget. That means the entire premium pricing story, the one that turned 3 Mile Island back on, rests on a fixed and aging supply of machines that nobody has demonstrated how to replace at scale once they finally reach the end of their working lives. Either the industry solves new construction in the next 25 years, or the whole business spends this boom bidding up an old fleet with no clear pipeline standing behind it. 2 owners, same industry, completely different outcome. One is sitting on a 50-year-old reactor, its construction debt paid off decades ago, now locked into a 20-year contract at triple the old wholesale price, with the security force and a decommissioning fund running in the background as the cost of admission. The other is trying to build one from scratch today, staring down the same decade-long timeline and the same multiplying budget that turned Vogtle, Olkiluoto 3, and Hinkley Point C into cautionary tales, hoping a government contract or a hyperscaler signature shows up before the financing runs out. Both are exposed to the same secondary insurance pool regardless of whether their own reactor ever has an incident. Scale and contracts help, but neither erases the fact that the industry's safety net is a shared one. The reactor was never really the business. It's the contract attached to it that's the business. And the liability underneath is one you can never fully insure away. Every business that looks simple from the outside has a machine running underneath it. This is what the machine actually cost. You decide.